Chuck raffle. And I'm famous for that in Cronulla. I played terrible for 11 games, but I did win the Chuck raffle.
It's not mine. We are live. Welcome to Eccles. I'm Ivan. You think they'd have learned from Friday when I managed to fall off a stage not to give me a chair with wheels, but...
Where were you Friday?
Newcastle.
Newcastle?
Yes. It was great fun.
Yeah, I like it.
Just open the telephone.
Is it something you said? Three people have just walked out.
we are live.
It's not very technically.
It's okay. It's only we're live on YouTube. Welcome to Eccles. I'm very excited. I need to find out because if I say Salford's in Manchester, people get upset. Yeah. So if I say Eccles is in Salford, is that okay? Yeah. Right. You know, well, that's good.
I'm a new Salford fan now.
Thank you very much.
Do Salford fans like us? I thought they didn't like us.
Who's us?
Well, not
Yeah,
you.
don't tar us all with the same brush.
Just me.
Play to the crowd.
If you've does anyone watch our programme? Listen to it. One person, brilliant. Occasionally, we are 4020 live. Where's the magazine, Phil? Have you not brought a load of magazines?
You just run over
Don't
them.
run away.
Here's one they prepared earlier.
This is like the massively. I mean, Trevor Hunt here, experienced broadcaster, celebrating 100 years of the BBC today.
No, I'm
Not all 100 years
done
anyway.
37. I've done
37,
37, but not 100. But
37.
yeah. BBC celebrates 100 years of the BBC today. Actually, it's birthday.
This isn't the BBC because
Jack's
they've
been there
got
for
extra
100
stuff.
years.
Something like that.
They're a media city, we're in Eccles.
There you go. So this is the magazine. We are the offshoot of. Do get offshoot.
Seamless.
There you go.
Got your article.
No.
So I'm the alleged host, Richard Shawwhite. Phil Kaplan, editor of Forty20 magazine. Can't even say the word just now. Former Great Britain coach, Super League coach
That was
of
me
the
for a minute,
No, I mean I don't really need to introduce Brian Noble, do I?
especially not in Salford.
No. TV's Danny Caprim from BBC One, BBC Two, Channel 4, Sky Sports, YouTube.
What about my playing?
Played for England in the World Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, Pundit of the Year nominee.
Is
Always
that
not
true?
one in our hearts.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Oh, well done.
Thanks. It's on
Yeah.
the 1st of November. A big swanky event in London. Just got the menu. Not sure I'm posh enough to go.
What's on it?
The start is asparagus and artichoke tart.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Is,
I think
is
the
there
Uber
lasagna
Eats.
on it? Is there a
I think
lasagna
Uber
on it?
Eats in London's really good, so I'll just get McDonald's like that.
No lasagna, because obviously in the Rugby League press box, lasagna is the staple food.
No, it's duck confit and pea and mint pearl barley risotto,
Artichoke and...
Are you sure
I'm
you're
gonna
not on
stink out.
MasterChef?
Artichoke and...
asparagus.
Don't
I'm
think I've
gonna
had
be
either of those two ever.
See, this is what happens when rugby league gets to posh places. We don't know what it is. We have no idea whether we want it or whether we'll eat it.
But we will complain about it.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining. I'm just slightly nervous that I might have to pre-eat.
No pies.
No.
Dessert? These are the important questions.
Some chocolate. There's one of them sphere things, I think, that melts when you pour on the chocolate on the top.
Oh no, I love them. It's when I was at that place.
Yes.
Chocolate fountain.
So I found out this morning anyway, so I got my official invite through.
And obviously you're in the Yorkshire Post at the weekend. No mention of us again. Every article, no mention of us. You've got to tell these journalists.
What would you like to say for the next one?
It was all thanks to them. not Tanya Arnold at the BBC, not Adam Hills, none of them people. It's all me and Phil.
No problem. I will amend my speech for next time.
And Trevor Hunt, 37 years at the BBC.
Yeah, 37 years of the BBC, a long time. 6th World Cup, umpteen different places around the world. So I'd like to think that back in '92 I went over to Fiji to sort out the Bala tour for 1994 because Fiji weren't playing international rugby league at that time. And so we went over in 1994, and we'd like to think that what we've got today with Fiji in the World Cup is some part played by Bala and the other lads who were on the tour. So it's a long time, isn't it, in coming Fiji, but here they are.
Yeah.
And we're all looking forward to watching them again. We enjoy watching them, and the singing they bring beforehand, and the rugby and everything else, and it's all part of what the World Cup's about, isn't it? With Samoa, Tonga, and the rest. Absolutely fabulous.
The hymn has been stuck in my head since Saturday night. Steve Mascot is here.
Hello.
You've just arrived.
Oh, there I am. Yeah. M62. I'm just learning.
Not only is this a live podcast, but it also is this another one of your book launches?
Well, I actually did a Salford book launch before the England-Fiji game, and no one showed up. So I thought it's an opportunity for a do-over. So I brought the books in. But yeah, I've learned that I don't think half an hour is enough. Is it? You don't allow to be half an hour late. You've got to allow to be an hour late.
Yeah.
So I'm slowly starting to get to know my way around.
I've been here all my life, and that's the first time I've been early today. So.
All right.
But we're a sport that is supposed to go down the M62 corridor, so how can you get lost when you come in?
Corridor's
from one
a
end to
really
the other?
charitable description of it.
There were parts of it today that were recovered.
It's just a congested corridor.
The World Cup has started, and I think on this panel we're all positive about it. Hopefully you are as well, and you at home. Brian, what's been your highlight of the World Cup so far?
I pick up on what Trevor said about the starts to. I think most people are attracted to either the Sippy Tau or the Haka or indeed the Fijian Hallelujah song. I think that gets people into the stadiums, but the talent on show is fabulous. Even last night watching Greece, I'm thinking the full-back chip chasing and playing what they see. It's just, as a football nut as I am, I like to see different things. I'm not a system man in any way, shape or form. And so the highlight is getting everybody here when it's been delayed for 12 months. And I think the actual games sell themselves. I haven't seen it. I've seen every game so far, and I've not enjoyed any one of them. So I think it's the standard of football, and once we recognise that, you know, there are some teams out there that are new, Jamaica particularly. Who would have thought the Cedars would have gone so well against the Kiwis? Greece last night against France. Many people thought France would. But there are going to come times when we get a cricket score somewhere, especially in Australia. And I think we all have to remember and beat on the drum that, well, they have to start somewhere. And if we're spreading our gospel, which we all try to do all over the world. I actually went to Jamaica for 2 weeks, and the amount of talent playing over there would surprise everybody. Whether they ever convert that into a meaningful competition or a meaningful entity, I don't know, because we're predominantly seeing expats, aren't we? So, Richard, your long answer to the short question that you asked is, I'm enjoying it all.
Long answers are better than long questions. Danica, what have you enjoyed most about the World Cup so far?
No, it finally started, I think. I think much like Brian, it's just, for me, everyone loves I love an underdog, don't I? So Jamaica, the Greece, even Lebanon and then in the women's game is going to be Brazil. So for me, it's a lot of the nations just coming forward and we're expecting big scores, but actually so far we've had big scores, but we've not had the scores. You know, Jamaica, New Zealand at the weekend could be different. That could be the turning point for the 100-pointer. But you know, Jamaica going out, they were happy with 2 points. They scored their first points in the World Cup. So for me, it's just getting started. I just love World Cup. I love sports, and there's nothing better than a World Cup and getting to turn on your TV every night, pretty much, and seeing some rugby league.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't have to watch.
Gives you something to do, doesn't it?
I mean, because I end up watching all kinds of rubbish, like old people playing snooker at midnight on one of the channels. I don't know why I'm doing that.
Well, I don't watch soaps. I don't particularly watch TV.
Well, you don't need to watch soaps in women's rugby, do you? What?
Okay. I'm just saying I don't watch EastEnders and Emmerdale and such like. So actually now I've got an excuse to sit down in front of my TV at the end of the day.
If you're a big fan of underdogs, why didn't you come and sign for Wakefield when I tried to get you about 300 times?
Because my ego's too big for that, for my playing.
You can follow Brian. He's
I like silverware. I just like supporting an underdog. I've got no shame.
I once signed for Wakefield right at the very end of my career as an assistant coach, and I went there and I don't think Wakefield fans have ever forgiven me, so you did right not to go. I was terrible for 11 games, terrible. And I was only there as a coach, but they had no players, so I said, yeah, I'll put my hands up.
nothing.
Gaslight you.
Oh yeah, my one does. He still likes me, believe it or not, even though we fell out. I think he does anyway.
Category 1 licence.
Yeah.
That's got to excite Marwan.
Yeah, yeah.
Those 3 words.
Trevor, what's been your highlight so far?
Well, I went to the first game at Newcastle, obviously, and we'd waited a long time for it. And now, like a lot of English fans, I think I was apprehensive about how it will turn out. You know, if we got beat by a couple of points and we were close, that'd be fantastic. If we won, even better. If we got well beaten, it would be dreadful, wouldn't it? Anyway, what did we do? We ran in 10 tries. We were fantastic. And we played really well. And Samoa, they can say they were undercooked and everything else, but we blew them away. And then afterwards, as is my wont, I went on a little bit of an expedition, should I say. Not an exhibition. Expedition. I was an expedition.
I think we saw those
expedition
bars on
later.
Saturday night.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to one or two of the pubs further afield in the city centre, basically where I thought, you know, there would be less of the rowdyism that sometimes goes with after events. And I found lots of Geordies, and so, quite a few of them had the shirts on, England shirts, scarves. And I thought they were like Northern fans, but they weren't, they were Geordies. And they'd been to the game for the first time, really enjoyed it, bought themselves shirts and scarves just to support England. And they were really, really in love with what they'd seen, albeit on that night and a couple of pints and everything else. But I really thought, for me, that was the highlight, because I went to Newcastle, I've been to Newcastle before, and when you go around the pubs in the city centre, you see more of the same, don't you? You see Salford shirts, Hull shirts, Bradford, the lot. But when I was on the outskirts, the Geordie accents were there. They were picking me up because obviously mine is
You were drunk.
English. Yeah, well, there was that as well.
Picking him up off the ground.
There was that as well. But, you know, that was for me it, because I just thought, well, this has arrived because people outside of the heartlands are taking notice.
And nobody mentioned the ticket prices.
Nobody at all mentioned the ticket prices.
I'm sure
we'll
we'll come back to that.
Steve,
Well, you know what? I kind of had a...
you don't have to ask him a question, you just go.
No,
Say,
because,
Steve,
well,
Steve,
you
go.
know,
Floor's
why would
yours.
you ask them one question and then ask me
Well,
a
I
different
might
one?
do.
You might do. Okay. What are you going to
No,
ask?
what's your highlight of the world?
I kind of had an answer in mind for this, and it was just seeing people, you know, catching up with people from all around the world, and particularly someone who's an expat Aussie, you know, seeing, you know, my old drinking mate Brad Walter over here, and also having a chat to Trent Robinson, and you know, the gear steward from Toronto Wolfpack was there last night.
Simon.
Simon. So. But just seeing familiar faces and everything like that, but then I talked to the 2 try scorers last night, and I spoke to Satini Tokolo. That's why I've got this. I was checking this.
You weren't sure who you spoke to.
Yeah. No, one guy came up to me and just started talking to me. He started being interviewed. He stood in front of me and he said, "Yeah," and I said, "Yeah." He just looked at me like this, and I'm like, "Okay." What great result tonight? What was it? You know, he said, "Oh, it's wonderful. It's a very historic moment." And I said, and what was the best moment for you? He goes, "Well, I didn't play."
I gave you a clue.
And I said, "Okay, where did you learn your rugby league?" And he goes, "Rhodes." And I went, "Oh, not like near Homebush in Sydney, Rhodes, as in the Colossus of." Yeah. And anyway, so a guy just demanded to be interviewed last night. So that was a great moment. That's not a familiar face. And then I spoke to both the try scorers, and Satini said, I said, "Oh, you know, you scored the first try for Greece." He said, "It's the first time I played against adults. I've never played against adults before." And he could only play in the tournament because he turned 18 last week. Wow. So he gave up his 18th birthday, and I said, you missed, you know, spending your 18th birthday with your family and friends. And he said, "This is my family now," you know.
Oh,
so it was fantastic. Yeah. And so I would say that it's not just the old familiar faces and me being a middle-aged guy who wants to see people from home. It's actually all the things around rugby league, you know, all of it, and why it's been such a good job over the years, you know. I'm actually getting emotional about it. It was such a fantastic night last night.
To extend from that, before you ask me, because I'm going to jump in anyway.
Fair enough.
The answer is Siobhan Bailey, which is probably not a familiar name to most. I'd certainly never heard of him, but he played for Jamaica on Sunday against Ireland. He is one of 6 players who've come over from the Duhaney Park Red Sharks in Kingston. Played the full 80 minutes, wasn't expected to in the second row. Got the honour of interviewing him afterwards, talking about the experience, and the first thing that struck you was his accent. And it's not in any way wishing to detract from the guy and what he did, but it was the most glorious Kingston accent, and it was quiet and it was quite a long drawn out drawl as he spoke, and hearing him talk about, he's a teacher in Kingston. I think he's late 20s, early 30s, and he's come over and made such an impression with the Jamaican squad that they felt they could pick him, and they were only going to put him on for about 30 minutes, and he made such an impression while he was on there that they couldn't bring him off. And when he talked about what he'd been through afterwards and how he's going to take this experience back to the island and infuse all the students that he teaches and the players that he plays with, you suddenly thought, actually, it doesn't matter what the results are in the World Cup, this is what it's all about. That's my highlight. Thank you for asking.
So, until we get to the bit where we say, oh, England, England! Brian Noble, you had a long playing career, but in your playing career and coaching career indeed, in the time you coached Great Britain, we didn't have a World Cup. In the time you played, the World Cup was a mess of a thing. When you look at these events, do you think, God, I wish I'd played something like this?
I wish I'd have played and coached in events like that. With something similar. So there was always a format, either a Six Nations, a Five Nations, or something that was equally challenging. I think the World Cup's more of a level playing field. If the draw goes your way, everybody's a chance. I think with the smaller sided, the thing for Great Britain as it was then, which is essentially England, although there'll be some Welshmen and Scots people, and Irish people contacting me after this one, is the fact that the international game needed their three best teams to be on a platform to show the worth of international football, and the only way that could be achieved, even in 2006 when we went down under, the Kiwis and the Aussies had a couple of games before we got there, so they had more of a rest within there, were to fly to the southern hemisphere, were to play 5 games on the bounce to be very, very successful. So it was indeed, I likened it to probably the biggest challenge in professional sport in the world then, and I don't detract from that. I think it was a tough gig, especially when you've played some of the disadvantages where you'd played 30% more games than your opposition in a season. The travel criteria, and then playing week, going from Australia, for people that somebody just got stuck on the M62 corridor today and were whinging and pissing and moaning as best as they can. But the reality for us was to go to Australia then, to New Zealand, to Australia, sorry, whichever way around, New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand, back to New Zealand, and those are life-changing and player-changing dynamics that you have to come to terms with. And so it was a tough challenge, but the group that we took in 2006, I still think was extremely as well prepared as it could have been, and provided some highlights there. The fact that we probably ran out of juice wasn't a surprise to me. But getting back to the World Cup, absolutely I would have loved to either played in one or indeed coached in one. It'd be one of the things, international football, that I'd probably drag myself out of bed for now, you know, and get committed to again. I think it's international football I'm a big fan of. If you look domestically where I've coached, South Wales ended up being North Wales in the same season, so there was a dynamics there. Over in Toronto, so I'm an expansionist at heart and a growth person. It's hard for me to call it expansion, it's growth. And to take up on Steve's point, I bump into people, I've got friends in Toronto and friends all over the world that they see what I see, they understand that genuinely, and it sounds corny sometimes, we're involved in the greatest game of all, both from the player's point of view, whatever format it takes. And we just, it's still sometimes in some parts of the world, other than the eastern seaboard of Australia, it's still the biggest kept secret in the world, and it frustrates the life out of me because it's a magnificent spectacle, and the people particularly, again picking up on what Steve says, I just love the people.
Danica, you played in the World Cup in 2017, which was would it be fair to say it was a bit of a secret tournament over here? I don't think there was much of it was televised. I mean, I've seen you in the film. If you've not seen Power Mary, you should go see it. It's absolutely brilliant.
It wasn't so much of a secret tournament in the sense that Women's Rugby League has literally taken off over the last 4 years. So there were games on, like the first game we played against Papua New Guinea was on at 7:30 in the morning, on whatever channel or red button or whatever.
And not jumped on the Women's Rugby League bandwagon by that point, you see.
No. It is, but when over in Australia, on the flip side of that, it was as big as the men, so we were put on Fox or whatever the equivalent, whatever it was out there, all of the games, not just the Australia ones. And we played, our pool games were 3 games a day, so they dedicated a whole day of essentially rugby league. You know, we did all the TV stuff, we did all of the media work when we were out there. So actually out there, it was the first time I felt like a professional player, because we rocked up and we flew on the Friday night, we landed Sunday morning, we played Wednesday afternoon. So it was a very quick turnaround, and then we played Sunday. So we played Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday. So it was a tight turnaround, but at that time, I say that time, it's only 5 years ago, but then it was such a massive thing that we'd been flown out, we'd been given this lovely hotel, we'd been given everything we needed in terms of medical and everything like that, and all of the media and the support, that actually you felt like you're a professional player. And despite the turnaround being very difficult on the bodies, especially the older ones of us that were out there, it was an incredible experience. And we only had 6 half-day training sessions before we went out. So to say that we went out and came essentially 3rd in a World Cup, I'd take that.
Jealous might be the wrong word. Envious might be the right one. How do you feel about...
I'm horrendously jealous. I don't care. Yeah, well, great. No, these girls have had 2 years. They've trained nearly every weekend. They've been in camps. They've been out to Australia and Papua New Guinea in 2019 to prepare. They're having top-notch. They're now getting participation fees, the same as the men, to be in the World Cup, which I took 5 weeks off unpaid. It's not a sacrifice, it was a choice I made. I could have just said, no, I'm not going. I made that choice to go out and do that. But I think it's fantastic for the women that are now playing, that they get all of that. The turnaround time is a little bit more, get an extra day, I think, in terms of games, but they're in the best possible position in terms of training and care that they could have, and they go into camp on the 28th, the evening of the 28th, so actually they don't have much time in camp together. I know the Australians have just got together now, they're together for a week before they fly, so I think the turnarounds in terms of everyone flying and then playing is going to be quite tight still. But yeah, I'd love to let me word this properly. I'd love to be in the position that the girls are in terms of the playing and the fees and the kind of things that they get now. But I'm not so bothered about playing now that I'm older and it hurts a bit more.
If England could win the World Cup, would you... I mean, they can't win the World Cup, of course, but would that change your mind about being older?
No, I'm really happy for the girls. The props in my position now are fantastic, so I'm under no illusion that I'm old and done. I still want to. I think you'll always want to, won't you? That never go away.
No.
That never goes away. So
Never leaves you. I still dream of playing for Lee Miners.
yeah.
They dream of you having.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the nightmares for them. Dream for me. That was it.
Being the Masters World Cup, Trevor.
So, well, yeah, I've been invited, but I've never been able to make it. My particular Silton skills are perhaps a little bit too delicate for Masters rugby at the moment. I've had my new knee though. I've had a new knee. Nobby told me, get a new knee, you'll be sorted. So perhaps this is the time.
The comeback is on.
The comeback is on.
What are your favourite memories of World Cups past? Obviously, as you mentioned, 6 World Cups you've covered.
Yeah, plenty. First one I did was 1995, which was over here. I did it with a guy called Peter Ward, who did a lot of radio leads, and he was a real character. And you picked up your tickets at Wembley for the very first game. I think it was England-Australia, or Wembley. You picked up your tickets. And Peter was old school colonial the way he talked. So he was, hello, Tralla, you and I are going to have a go at this. And so he's a lot different to me, really. And so we get there, and we're queuing up for ages to get our tickets. And the guy who's handing them out says, I'm sorry, the person in front, like, he doesn't seem to have a ticket. And Peter says, well, in that case, he should go to the back of the queue. And he said, no, it'll only take me 2 minutes. He went, I'll time you then. And he stood like that, and he waited for his ticket. He came back. So the next game, we're up at Hull, playing some game at Hull, and I get there, and Peter's over at Leeds because they were split. So we were doing for Radio Kelang, which is Papua New Guinea. Was doing for Radio Australia, and we're doing Radio New Zealand as well as doing stuff for BBC and things. So we're really extremely busy. But we get to the next one, and the guy says, he sees me come up, and then he's going through his tickets like this, and in the end he says, I can't find Peter's ticket, I can't find it. I said, you're okay, he's over at Leeds. So that let him off. But then I did PNG, and on this one, I'll finish with this one. But basically, PNG, I went and interviewed various players after they played over at St Helens and what have you. And I did all the interviews, and then I go to send them back to Radio Kalang. And I said to
Is
Peter...
that a real name for
yeah,
a
it's
station?
called Radio Kalang.
Radio
yeah.
Kalang.
Yeah, and I said,
Awesome.
Peter, I said, I've got all this bloody stuff from PNG. I can't understand a single word they've said. He said, don't worry, when they play it out there, they won't understand your questions. So that was it, 1995 World Cup, my first one.
How many times have you been here? Well, before you moved here, Steve, how many times did you come over and cover the Kangaroos?
Well, I came over on all the tours starting in 1994. So the last big one I missed was the '92 Challenge World Cup final at Wembley. Steve Reniff beating John Devereux, and then after that I went to 1995, 2000, 2008, 2013, 2017, and on each occasion went to as many games as I could. So I didn't. I mean, I think now I would be in trouble if I was covering the Australian team on this tour and I'd gone to Doncaster last night. I'd get a boot up the backside from my boss. What are you doing that? But I managed to get away with it. And I've got there's just so many memories. I mean, like I remember that Fiji, everything was so. In 1995, all the teams had been basically taken up rugby league because Colin Love had invited them to the sevens, and suddenly they got invited to a 13-a-side. So no one had seen South Africa and Fiji play rugby league before, and it was just the look of astonishment on the Speckies' faces when they walked into Keighley and saw Fiji play South Africa. It was, and the kick-off being delayed at Central Park for England and Fiji, and very late nights in the Queen's Hotel with the Aussie team in 2000, and fire alarms going off, and yeah. I mean, I guess my favourite memory though would be. It sounds weird, but seeing South Africa play Fiji at Keighley, it was just a revelation to everybody who was there. And I remember I got a vote on man of the match. I might have got the only one. And Brian will know that it's a toss-up, the reaction you get for when you're picking man of the match. We picked the man of the match, it was my P.O. Nakumba or something like that. And the whole crowd cheered, and I thought, this is the greatest day of my life. They think I'm a good judge. And no one's thought that since. So it was a fantastic, just been great memories. And just the driving. I mean, one time, before sat-navs, I decided I was going, and when Souths were getting kicked out of the competition, kicked out of the competition in 2000, I tried to go to every game, and I actually got the gig covering it for Reuters. But I didn't have a car, so I was getting lifts from everyone, and Reuters want copies straight away, So I'm like asking to stop at service, Dave Hadfield, and stop at services, and anyway, I decided I was going to go to the Lebanon game from Leeds, where the Australians were based, by the most direct route on the map. Not a motorway, the most direct route on the map. So I went to Hereford where they invented cows, but I wasn't supposed to go to Hereford, I went all the way.
Australian education wants a bit, doesn't it? Cows invented in Hereford.
But I got all the way to South Wales. The game was over. I stopped in a motorway and I would drive straight back to Leeds. And when I got back, I think Souths had been kicked out of the comp. That would be the stupidest memory. But there's 1,000. Sorry, I answered that too long. Sorry.
Keep speaking. Saves me having to think of a question to ask now.
Just on that, just when he was mentioning Hadfield, the late great Hadfield is a friend of all of us here, journalist who passed away earlier this year. And you mentioned that you kind of implied driving. Well, Dave Hadfield, he could not drive, but he worked for the Independent. And he had a car allowance. And he had a car allowance because once they rang him up to see where his copy was, and he said he'd left his keys in the porch. And therefore they said in the porch. So he got a car allowance from the Independent for his car, which he couldn't drive, and he didn't have one anyway. Well, that was it. The Northern accent.
The story can now be told.
Just going back to that Fiji South Africa game, I was there as well. And there was a women's game on beforehand, which was interesting, because we think it's a modern development, but actually it was being played 30 odd years ago. The thing that strikes me about that day, and you're absolutely right to bring it up because it opens the eyes of people, is that the coach of Fiji was Graham Murray, and that was the first time we'd ever come across Graham Murray, and to be in his presence when he did the post-match analysis was like a different level. With the greatest respect to the coaches that we interviewed on the British game, Graham Murray was on was different, and the way he analysed it and talked about it was different. The passion that he had for Fiji that day was different. But it was also, I think, the first time we'd heard the South African national anthem since it became the Rainbow Nation.
Oh, right,
So
yeah.
all of that as well was just really emotional, and only World Cups can do that, which is why they are so exciting. I can remember as a fan, which will probably tell you how old I am, going to the World Cup final in 1970 at Headingley. Was only 9 at the time, so I don't really remember a lot about the game, other than I was
You and
told.
Trevor are like Benjamin Button, aren't you?
Yeah. I was told by my dad, who took me, that Great Britain were going to win the World Cup because they'd beaten Australia in the group stage, and so we just had to turn up and watch Great Britain win, and they'd lift the cup. And as a kid, that's what inspires you and makes you want to be a fan of sport. And it was the most horrendous game. It was known as the Battle of Leeds, looking back on it. I think there were 2 players sent off. One of them, after the full-time whistle went, was John Atkinson, who was a policeman, never got sent off, but headbutted somebody after the game had finished. It was such a brawl that even the national press, which never really commented on rugby league, had headlines. The Daily Mirror, I think, said, "Thugby League, this sport should be banned." And it breaks your heart as a 9-year-old kid, but you become inspired by it's a World Cup. And all of these green and golds and Kiwis and even the PNG, when they started coming over, getting the chance to see them play once every 4 years, or see names that now we take for granted, because you can watch an NRL game every week, but then you probably had to wait for the video to come in a week later, and then go and hire it, and then put it on and see these iconic colours and players, and then they were playing on your pitch. And you just thought, that's why international rugby has a dimension beyond club rugby league, and World Cups just inspire you as a spectator or a player.
I mean, it was good to see the Australians play, wasn't it, for the first time in 700? World ranked number 4 men's Australia. Is that's the official word. Sean Wayne is the coach of England, and he led them to a 60 points to 6 win over Samoa on Saturday. Apparently we'd written England off. Oh, did you write them off, Steve? Was it you?
I wrote off England. No, I
Yeah,
didn't.
you did.
I think
Oh,
I said.
I'm
I
just
think I
asking if
said.
you did or not.
I think what I said is they are favourites for this game, but I think they'll lose. So, I was wrong at both counts probably.
Because Sean Wayne was upset. Apparently, people had written off England.
No, I wasn't upset with people like us. It was the other journalists.
Oh,
the
who
other
were not
ones, oh,
here.
that's all right.
It was
It's
everybody
a
who's
call
not
to
here.
arms, though. It's a rallying call. You're always.
I've got a
Brian
bad
will tell you,
reputation,
You're
so I
always
don't
looking for a theme, aren't you?
want-
The truth is, you don't know until they're out there. That's the reality. As a coach, what I did like about what Sean Wayne said was the way that he recognised that we have good players as well. And you've got to remember, 8 or 9 of those players have played at the highest level in the National Rugby League in Australia and done well and been good players. So he certainly has the belief that I always have. Our best players are as good as Australia's or anybody's best players. And recognising the fact that he had a good team and his defensive stand on that, it can get you back up, but that's your job. That's your job to say, well, yeah, I understand what's coming against us, but do they understand what's going against them? And that's the reality. You don't know till you get into the tournament as to where you're going, who's going to stay on the planet, who's going to perform well. I thought the team at the weekend did everything that was asked of them, and all the jewels and sparkles that we see in our team week in, week out, like Wellesby finding right pass selections for different things. The introduction of Victor Adley, I thought, really added to the spine of the team. Sam Tompkins, Williams, Wellesby, fluid. Question marks over all of those, of all of the players, and his selections go away. The introduction of Herbie Farmworth, who I know quite well from different connections, and Dominic Young, those that watch the National Rugby League every week understand that you have to pick them. Because I suppose the challenge is people don't want you to pick if they think there's something equivalent in our country. But I also throw in there the introduction of Andy Eccles, the Solville player. Absolutely, thoroughly deserved. You have to pick form players, and he's done that as well as Wayne. So we can all be critical. We can all say they're going to play a certain way, but I thoroughly enjoyed the performance at the weekend. But come quarter-final, semi-final chat, it'll be a different challenge from now on in.
I thought it was a classic though, like coach kind of mind game is before a big game you need a rallying call, and you're looking for one everywhere, and you can bet if all the players recite it after they win, that it's been used to G them up. It's not accidental. They haven't all read the same story and independently come to the conclusion that we're being underrated. Someone stood in the briefing room and said, look at this, you know, and I guess it worked, and now I don't think they probably need to do that for the next 2 pool games. Maybe for the semi, Wayne, and the final, he'll come up with another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's as big as that, Steve. I'm not sure it's as big as that, because I genuinely believe he feels he's got a good team, because I think he's got a good team. We all do, the way that before. The good thing for me was the fact that they were clinical. Normally you see an England team make a few more errors than they did. I think the only error I saw the whole of the game was the Wellesby intercept. And that was on the verge of it. Had he got that right, it was another try, another score. I think the biggest story is the I don't know what to call this, the Samoan performance, because they had 9 NRL grand final. Yeah, not very good.
That's the broadcast version.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, England
thought they
went
were
out
pulling
for a
it
good
through the
performance,
towelling.
but Samoa didn't play as well as we expected.
No.
Like, you know, all of the stuff that was out about is Samoa have got 8 grand finalists, rah 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 rah. Like Brian said, we've got what 10, 11 people that have either played or are currently in the NRL. But yeah, clinical performance, really well done England, great score, exactly what it needed. But how poor were Samoa?
Yeah, but that's always the argument, isn't it? You know, are you playing well because the opposition's playing poorly, or are the opposition playing poorly because you're playing well? And it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it?
That first 30 minutes was tough. I thought it was a good workout.
End of
But
the day,
there
it
was
didn't
only
matter,
3
it was
errors in
60.6,
that
wasn't
first
it?
half, and even less from England in the second. So if you kind of look at the stats, for me, they opened up Norway in such... The mindset looked right. The first tackles are the ones that you witness, don't you? Are you driven back or do you drive them back? And it almost shows your mindset. From us in the terraces, I mean, you were on the bench watching it, Danica, you were playing in these. That kind of, to me, sets the platform for what goes thereafter. And right from the first exchanges, we were in there getting on top. And I just thought we played exceptionally well. They were disappointing. But, you know, a point that sometimes I think must fire players is, no Liam Farrell, no Johnny Lomax, no this, no that, no the other. Hold on, I've been selected.
Yeah.
So am I only a second choice? I'm as good as him on my day. That's what you must think, mustn't you? And at the end of it all, I think that might have contributed to the way it was, because lots of punters said, well, this England team, they've not got this, not got him, not got the him. You know, by the time they finished, we were really not, even Lewis Dodd, who's not played all season, as to how much stronger they would have been with him in the side. I think that gives you a siege mentality that helps you take on the opposition. And if I was in there, that'd have been something I'd have been drumming
How
on.
good was George Williams?
I think
Do
you
know
can
what I
play
mean?
that siege mentality once, and I think he played it perfectly. And all this, we're being written off. That's a great line, but you can only do it once. I think now that they've shown their hand, that won't
I think
wash.
his biggest struggle now is selection, isn't it?
Well, the
He's got so
interesting
many
thing for me,
small
which
selectors to
summed up
select from.
probably the greatest success that Sean had, was George Williams, who I think, by his own admission, has not had the greatest season at Warrington. His stats are still pretty good, but he has looked like he was playing an unfamiliar brand of rugby this year, that he hadn't quite come to terms with. All the people around him weren't giving him the ammunition he needed to be the best he could. You then put him back into a Sean Wayne system where he understands exactly what's expected of him, takes on the mantle of responsibility that he clearly likes, and for me, he was the man of the match. And I know that obviously everybody's got their opinion on who perhaps it should have been or who officially it was. Radley was superb, but I just thought Williams controlled that game.
You can
from
tell why
start
Victor
to
Radley
finish.
gets knocked out all the time, can't you? The way he was getting into tackles. That's what you want, a body on the line,
I
head on
think
the other
interestingly,
side of
just
the
to
pitch.
go back to Sean, I think tactically he got it absolutely right. All week I was banging on to the people that I jumped into, you've got to go at their middle, because their strength was Pahalihi and Paolo and all of these big fellas. But their weakness, sometimes their strength is their weakness. And their engines and their tanks needed juicing out. And I thought the outside backs particularly, and the middle blokes, I thought he got it bang on. Because the game didn't really crack open until 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
you've got
probably
to
the
do
first
that,
try
you've got
and
to take
second
some
half.
juice out of them. Yeah.
Watkins' try probably turned it.
Made in Salford.
Made him so.
Made in Salford.
And of course, then you get Matt Parrish, of course, who was coach.
Ex-Salford.
Well, 6 games. 6 games, 1
No,
win,
okay.
and then I went to interview him, and I'd been told he was on a flight back, they thought. They weren't even sure. So, you know, that was Matt at the time. But, you know, Matt, He looked shell-shocked in the press conference after. He was asked about the 6 tries in the last 16 minutes. He had no answers for anything. He didn't know what to say. He was right back from the mic, so whatever he was saying, you couldn't really hear it. It was one of the toughest press conferences I've heard a coach not answer to in all my time. He really didn't have anything to say, did he, Phil? Oh, nothing.
Was that the funniest piece of advice I was ever given? Steve will know this. I played under Jack Gibson and Ron Massey at Cronulla in '85 and a little bit of '86, and kept in touch with Jack Gibson when I started my coaching career. And just on the fact that they didn't know what to say, I once rang Jack, I can't remember what it was at Braft. It was some difficult situation with the chairman, and publicly it was out there. And I rang him and I said, Jack, I don't know what to say. And he just went, well, don't say anything. We'll put the phone down. So I didn't say anything.
Wayne Bennett, give him nothing, take him nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, two things. I'll come back to the team selection in a moment because I'm intrigued as a coach how you select these things. But going into a press conference after a game like that, where you know the team's been heavily beaten, how do you face up to the reality that your team's lost in a World Cup opener in front of a global audience by 54 points? Not that, of course, you would have been in that same situation, but similar situations in the past. How do you go out there and try and sell positivity?
Well, you protect your players first and foremost. That's your role. And you give the press some things that they might be able to hang their hat on, but you don't give them too much. You just put your hands up where you have to. If something's blatantly gone wrong, you have to put your hands up. Otherwise, they sense you're a fraud. If you've done something fundamentally wrong that's cost you a game, you say, well, I think we did that wrong. But you try not to highlight any individual. If somebody gets hammered, there's a certain piece of footage that blames one person, well, I'm sure he wouldn't want to do that again. And I'm confident that he won't do that again. And then it becomes a selection issue afterwards as to who you pick and why you pick them and whether you think they can change the things that they've done, or you pick somebody else in that position. So I think that would be my criteria. If you've had a shit day at the office, there's no point saying that it's all roses and flowers, but you protect everybody as best you possibly can and get ready for the next one.
Wayne was always more critical after a win than after a loss. After a loss, he'd jump to their defence. And after a win, when everyone wanted to talk them up, he'd talk them down.
Don't ask Wayne Bennett how excited you are for the World Club Challenge. That was a really bad question of mine. And a prickly interview followed, which was good fun. Good learning experience. You're always learning.
Or you could have asked
Every
him.
day's a school day.
You could have asked him what he thought about the reenactment that Great Britain were coming back into the world. What did you feel about that? And he said, no idea, I'm an Aussie. Or worse than that. So,
we sold a few more shirts, that's it. Made a few pounds for the RFL. The question I was about to ask was about how you select an international team, because you've got players from different clubs and different egos and whatever, but you've also got a group of players who you know and trust, but then you're picking players on form as well who you may not know. How do you integrate the two?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I can only probably explain how I tried to do it with the coaching staff. So I had great coaches. We used to meet every Wednesday in the season, every Wednesday religiously, which was hard because all the coaches were full-time. Dave Lyon, John Sharp, the conditioner was in there, what they could imagine, and we first and foremost analysed what the statisticians said. So you looked at what the form book said, who could make the meters, who's making the tackles, who's on paper giving the form. So you have a paper sift, and then you talk about all your own particular favourites, and you keep that particular squad. You also look at people that are out of form, that have been in the international, for whatever reason, been in the international circuit before, and you know what kind of job they can do on an international front. You look at combinations for different clubs. You look at halfback combinations for clubs, because the more fluidity you have without having to be overtly coaching the team helps you. So it's a really, really thorough process, and it was probably. And then you get to the end of the season and somebody pops their head up like Andy Eccles did in the last 10 games of the season. You think, well, you've got to pick him because he's on form, because you have to pick your form players as well, irrespective of what you think. So you literally have to take your coaching hat off and you put your international hat on and you say, right, what's best for the team here? And then you've got to look at whether people can complement each other. You do background checks on their character. Are they good for a group? Can they spend long time together in camp? and how you manage those kind of things. So all the things that people don't see, it doesn't happen the night before where you think, well, I think he's a good bloke, I'm picking him, he can play. It was never done on reputation in my system. I'm confident that the systems are still the same and they're still as thorough. So it really is a meticulous. And then you got the old adage that you think somebody can win you a game, or you think somebody can save you a game, and you think, well, do we take a chance? He's not playing well. Can he actually grow and be a part of an international team? And that's some of the risks that you take. You might have one or two there that people scratch their head and think, well, why has he picked him, or why has he picked her? Or so it's a really, really thorough process. It's not mix and match. It's not like on a coupon and you think it's not fantasy form team. It's you have to see, and they have to be able to play the way that you want them to play as well. So you have to pick players that complement your style of play or whoever you're going to come against. You're playing against Samoa, Fiji. They're absolutely huge physical, athletic people. So you have to understand that you've got to match them somewhere, or at least have the ability to negate what their prowess is and how you think you're going to exploit what they're good at, or exploit or get behind the scenes. So it's massively involved in the selection process, because at the end of the day you have to put a group of people together that like each other and want to have a dig. You know, the old run hard, tackle hard adage. So it's very, very thorough.
It's only not just on a cigarette package.
No. Frank Myler at Great Britain was my first Great Britain coach. He generally used to pick the team on a fag packet, and he didn't know Wayne Proctor was there till the 4th week. Yeah. Look at that fella there. He's turned up to every practice session on all you lot of morning. Says, that's Wayne Proctor. He says, I knew I had one missing. And I picked him for the next 2 games.
What would your background check have got, Danny? Would you have had a positive report from coaches?
Yeah, well,
Tries hard.
Not always. Leading up to the World Cup, Chris Chapman was my England coach at the time, and regardless of whether he'd been at the game or not, then he used to try and get round to as many games as possibly could, because he was independent of any club. And every Sunday, without fail, you'd have to text him something that'd gone well and something that hadn't, and then you'd have to analyse both. And then when he got the footage, he would then message you back and say, oh, you were spot on, or are you sure about that? Look at this time. And then he tried his best off his own back. We probably had a one-to-one session with him every 3 weeks, but based on the league that we were having, because obviously we didn't have any international fixtures. And then 2017 we went out to France in the June, and we knew that basically was, for us, it was World Cup selection time. And I remember getting my first starting shirt in the first test, and I was like, all right, cool, I've got my first start for England, this is a good... Got about 65 minutes in the first game, and I was like, sweet. And the second game, he left me on at prop for the whole second half, having played probably 25 minutes the first half. And I walked off, and he went, what have you got left now? I nearly cried, and I was like, absolutely not. It was 36 degrees as well in the south of France. And I was like, absolutely enough. And he was like, no, I can tell, really well done. And I was like, is that it? Is that it? I've left everything. I was nearly crying. I had to crawl off the pitch. I'd put everything into it, and I was like, is that it? And then that night, he had to leave early because he works for Sport Coach UK or something, but he had to go do some table tennis World Cup. And he just texted me saying, continue playing your season like that, and you're going to be in the World Cup squad. And that was the bet. I think I've screenshotted and framed it, because he never gave you any compliments. He'd give you like feedback and say, right, you ran hard here, but it was always a but. And he was always looking at those tiny 1%ers. It was never marginal, huge gains that he wanted to make. It wasn't huge gains, sorry. It was like these tiny marginal 1% things, and he was like, use your right knee more. And I was like, what do you mean use my right knee? Then we'd watch footage, and I never used to use my right knee to get up. And he was like, bring your knee up, and then you'll get up quicker. And it was these tiny little... So you never really knew how good or how bad you were doing. You always knew you had something to work on. But getting that text from him to say, keep playing like that in your World Cup, was probably the highlight of my life. And then I went and snapped my ACL.
Until today.
Obviously, I was going to say, but then a week later we came to a satellite session and I tore my ACL.
But no, you're on the telly and everything. You're famous.
No,
running
not
for an
famous.
award.
But
Do you get any social media grief? Because obviously, not only are you on telly talking about sport, but you're a woman talking about sport on the telly.
I'm a woman talking about a men's sport.
Indeed. Well, I mean, that's 3 things.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's plenty out there. Luckily, I don't follow much of it. You know, some people send me stuff or copy me and stuff, and I just... Do you know what? If you take everything to heart that you read, Like, I wore a green blazer for the Challenge Cup final for the women in May, and somebody was like, why she was trying to be Fiona? And I was like, is that really what you've got? You want me to look like Shrek and Fiona? So if you looked at all of that stuff, like literally anybody's, and the guys, and it is the men that are bothered that I'm not in the kitchen washing and cooking, then bless you, it's cute. Because what I'm doing is
I'm
a
on
much
camera
better
so
job.
people can't see me nodding, but
Yeah, what I'm doing is a much better job than you. Like, keyboard warriors are my favourite people. Those of them that sit at home on the sofa watching and telling us that they can do a better job than Sean, they can run harder than Victor Radley, or they'd have a better outcome than anything else. And congratulations, I'd love to have as big an ego as you do. Mine's pretty big, don't get me wrong. But if I read them all, yeah, then you might get down. But you've got to listen. I'm not asked to be employed by the BBC or Sky Sports or Channel 4. They keep on wanting me back, and listen, as long as I'm watching rugby and getting paid for it, then I'm going to keep doing it. And that's as fickle as it might sound. I'm really loving being able to watch Rugby League alongside loads of fantastic people in fantastic venues and get my hair and makeup done every time I turn up. What woman doesn't want
Brian
that?
likes that.
I like that bit best.
Yeah, I was saying that. I said that earlier, didn't I? That's one of my highlights. Genuinely is one of the highlights. And then somebody walks around going, do you want a tea, do you want a coffee, do you want a sandwich? And I'm like, I'm watching rugby from a prime position, I'm getting paid, I'm made to look better, I'm being fed and watered. Who cares if you don't like what I've got to say? Half the time, I'll think I don't like what I've got to say, but I'm saying it and it's coming out.
So we got straight to Trevor. 37 years at the BBC, on the radio. We get none of this on the radio, do we? We're like the second class citizens, third class citizens.
Well, let's be fair, and you can answer this. Why would I need makeup on the radio? Well, you could say
Good point, Trev.
you do need makeup.
37
that's
years, you've nailed it.
Yeah, it's.
You look great though.
Well, thanks very much, but that's because you're usually looking at a radio dial, aren't you? So that's what it is.
I just close my eyes and pretend.
But
Imagine.
the thing is that you've always got to remember it's better being a has-been than an er-been. That's the way of it. And you do see that many a time with people who they're saying, how long did you play rugby? When did you play? And all the rest of it. And they'll say, oh, well, I packed up when I was 16. I packed up when I was 17. You're like, well, actually, you might have been good then, but you've never kind of carried on. The thing is to put yourself on the line. Now, I only played amateur, obviously, but I did play like nearly 350, 360 games at various levels, and that, it's not that easy. And there are loads better players than me, so I'm not saying I were a good one, but I had longevity. Let's put it that way.
You don't need to be a serial killer to do the police round of the newspaper.
But I really think that like you're saying, Danny, it's fantastic. You put all the effort in, you get the reward.
Yeah.
The one thing I did notice, that everything you said you were doing, you enjoyed most, it was like almost being a man. Somebody waiting on us hand and foot. All right, not having our makeup done, but our shirts pressed and all the rest of it. You've got to be careful on where you're on this line. We were talking about that before.
You'll be kicked out of the Rugby League Media Sisterhood.
We want her in.
Is there such a thing?
I'm told there is.
I want to be part of that then.
I mean, I didn't know I was
We can be allies.
Yeah, but it's one of them things,
Sounds like
isn't
a
it?
really bad indie band.
The Rugby League Media
Hey, I'd
Sisterhood.
be the lead singer. I'd be the lead singer
You go
in that.
watch him that.
Can you sing?
N-
Obviously you can dance, we know this.
No, I mean, I can sing in my car and in my shower. Yeah, I'm Celine Dion.
I
Behind
didn't
closed
understand
doors.
That's a
who
good thing
Fiona
to know.
was. When you said Fiona, I didn't understand that.
Shrek and Fiona.
Ah,
I wore a-
Shrek. Oh,
I wore
right,
a green blazer that was
yeah.
similar to this.
Right.
And the one bit of feedback I got was, I was like, do you know what? We won't want to be Fiona, a Disney princess.
I wish
Hit me
I'd not
up.
asked that question. Now take that one out. Take that out.
Well, live, Trevor. Well, live.
Sorry.
But yeah, people don't like it. But do you know, if you don't like it, switch it off or turn it off. But you want to watch rugby, so if you want to watch rugby, you got to watch me. Unlucky.
You played loads of games. Troy's played loads of games. Brian's played loads of games. How many games did you play for?
6.
6. Steve.
At what level? Windang under sevens?
Yeah, absolutely. At any
The
level.
last game I played would have been the Illawarra High School knockout when I was like 7, 8, or 18.
Need to get us
Oh,
off.
maybe,
Aussie
yeah.
media against
Actually,
British
they
Oh, yeah, I haven't
organised.
included those.
Yeah, they-
7.
Are they first class? Do they
No,
count?
you're right.
That's
You're right.
the record.
They actually had a media cup, a journalist cup in Sydney, and John Quayle and Ken Alfson organised, and they all came along and used to stand on the side and laugh at us, But
Is anybody sober?
yes, actual, yeah. What was I going to say? Peter Fitzsimons, he said he's only played rugby league twice, and he's been taken to hospital both times, and one of them was in the journalist cup. So that would have been the last time I played. That would have been in the 90s. So I haven't counted my appearances. I don't
Too
know.
many. Too many to count.
More appearances
Big
than
time over there.
tackles, that's for sure for me.
We have spoken about England. Australia, Steve, they're back. The world's number 14.
Back like playing, you mean?
Back playing.
Yeah, no,
Rugby
I
League.
thought that to me was Fiji's best ever performance against Australia. I looked at the margins, and it's not their closest. I think 32 is their closest margin, and it was 34. Well, 30. Anyway, yeah, 34. So, but I thought they just never looked completely, overwhelmed. And with some of those players, like Api Coruscant and Viliami Kikau, I just thought they don't look overwhelmed. And someone said the other day Australia's aura is gone, which is a popular kind of thing to say. It's kind of a bit of an empty thing to say, but the place where it has sort of some veracity is just the fact that they're playing now against a whole bunch of guys who play against them every week. So if you get an aura from not knowing someone and being intimidated by them from a distance, that distance is gone now. So even last night, Laurent Fraser knew it's like, a lot of people watched that and they would have thought, well, it's disappointing to only beat Greece by 34-12. And he went, well, look at their spine. Lachlan, Ilias, Pete Mamezelas. He said they've got their spine. They've got NRL players.
Good players.
And so he's like, we were pleased that we stuck to our task last night. So the whole competition, even though we still have those great stories we've been talking about guys who have never played against adults before, or they raised in Rhodes, or they're from Kingston, equally, we've got familiarity that we couldn't have dreamt of in 1995, where the guys know each other. The two most disparate teams of this tournament would be Jamaica and Australia, I guess, as far as who knows each other, and you'd still get half a dozen on either side hugging each other, sending each other texts during the week. It's just a smaller world generally, and I think the World Cup sort of reflects that. That didn't answer your question.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Oh, well, we talked about Australia. You want me to talk about Australia? Talk about Australia.
We don't. I just think at the time, I didn't realise we didn't have as much time as I thought. But when we get to the latter stage of the competition, this is something I mentioned with Kyle Amo, who's our guest on Thursday.
When you guys finish, I have to stand here and talk for another 15 minutes because I was late. Is that right?
You've got to
No, sell your book.
That'll be easy. You'll do it easy.
That's a Steve, what's your book about? But we're talking about Greece and Jamaica and Ireland and whatever in these stories now. But when we get to the final four, we will be talking a lot about Australia and New Zealand. That's their time to shine. This is everyone else's time to shine, almost at this point.
Yeah, it is, and I guess that's the thing that people sort of who haven't been to many matches seem to be struggling to get their heads around. That they go, why is it the ground full, or why was the standard seem to be lower than what I'm used to if I'm watching NRL and Super League? And I think if you go to a match, you'll kind of get your head around it. That there's something different. There's a different vibe at a World Cup as far as it doesn't feel kind of as cutthroat. It feels more, and I think it's because if I go back out to Australia and I run into a bunch of my mates, we'll go to the pub and it's great to see you. But if I go to a wedding in Ireland and people have come from everywhere, it's a completely different vibe. You know what I mean? It's like every second person I see, I know, and some of them I can't quite place. And so there's that kind of carnival celebration vibe at the games, and maybe it doesn't translate so well on TV. And someone goes, oh, the score was too big, or the seats were empty. And I think you've got to really kind of become involved in the event socially and be present to actually appreciate that it has things that other games don't have.
I think equally.
I'll just back that one up. All I'm saying is, obviously I've seen all the complaints about, again, are they trolls or whatever they call them on the social media, and how many of them are there? Should we take them on or not? I don't think so, really. But if you go to the game, I was at Warrington in Lebanon, if you go to that game, the atmosphere was terrific. Absolutely fantastic. And, we saw a game where Lebanon surprised everybody, and I'd never really realised how good a player Mitchell Moses was. Absolute cracker in that game, and some others as well against New Zealand. So you sit at home, you watch it on telly, and you watch the telly. I watched the game last night on telly, and I've watched others, but the atmosphere doesn't really come across. You get more knowledge because you get the stats and the backgrounds and all that, but the atmosphere doesn't come across. Whereas when you're at the game, it's a fantastic atmosphere. You're part of it. You live in the situation, and when things happen, your peripheral vision gives you aspects of the game over here that the TV camera's focused on there. It's a whole experience to me, and to me that's why why you should be going on what you benefit
There are some
from.
basics
Sorry.
though of the World Cup that I don't think people kind of on social media really understand. They don't understand that the World Cup is a separate organisation to the Rugby League. That it's got a
No, the RFL to blame for everything.
yeah.
That's their fault. We were late on the M62.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Rimmer's fault.
They don't like someone who works in the media. To me, was surprised when I said that it's got to fund the international game for 3 or 4 years. I mean, what do you mean? No, I said, I don't mean pay for test matches. I mean it pays for grassroots around the world. So you've got to generate money. Otherwise, the International Federation doesn't have anything to give to the countries, and that's a basic thing that I don't think has been communicated very well. Because I think corporations, companies are shy about talking about money, so they just don't talk about it at all. And it's a very important part of this tournament is to raise money so it can be given to countries like Brazil and Canada, who are now providing teams, and they're providing content now to generate more money. Then it can go to Thailand, or it can go to the Philippines, or it can go to Belarus. Not at the moment, no.
Rewind.
And people just don't kind of understand that. And there's some real basic things that I think you don't need to get in an argument with people on social media, but I think you've got to sort of explain some really basic things that people don't understand about this,
I think there's two things that come off the back of that. One is we want a strong international federation, and it's only going to be strong if it has money. How can it dictate to the NRL and the RFL if you're asking people to do things, but economically you're not in a position of power? So I think that's one of the reasons why generating profit from a World Cup is number one. I think we also need to stop being apologists, and I think this is a rugby league thing. That there was a slight glitch in the sound system at Newcastle on Saturday. For those that were there, it didn't spoil anything. It was odd for maybe 10 or 15 minutes because people were looking around going, do we carry on, what do we do, how does this impact on the health and safety of the situation? But actually it didn't spoil anything. But as soon as the Rugby League World Cup organisers, who I think have been brilliant in keeping it going for an extra year amongst anything else, start putting out an apology for it at half time, it has to be reported. You don't need to do that.
It's like an admission of guilt, isn't it, which is not their fault.
Be confident.
I think you ask a question, what happened, and someone gives you a quote. Here's what happened. This is the power.
But you don't do it during the game because it magnifies it. I think
really, by 40 minutes into the game, who remember what happened?
Well, and it's the same with Mick Hogan's been interviewed about ticket sales. You don't have to justify it. The ticket sales that you're getting at the moment are commensurate with every other World Cup that we've had, and you're going to make more money.
I think it's important to people to know though that they've already exceeded 2013 by £1 million, and they've just gone past 2017 with 57 games to go. I think that is a good riposte to people who are saying it costs too much to get in. Why they could fill the place?
But don't do it as an interview because you're then making it a story.
But equally,
and nobody else was really talking about that other than us in our echo chamber. I think the other thing that hasn't been mentioned.
We think we're honest. We say it and say it as it is, and we're honest about our game. So you can't actually accuse us of hiding anything.
No,
but let's be honest then. If you were a true rugby league fan, and I can say this because on Saturday night I bought my own ticket to go watch Australia. That's how desperate I was to go see James.
You bought a ticket to watch Australia?
Yeah, and
you were getting selfies, weren't you?
My God.
I met James Tedesco, Life Made.
Did you ask for his shirt?
World Cup. No, I didn't. I heard that. I think he said he wanted my number, but I didn't know he was married and.
Number 10.
Yeah, he said.
That's a great
Do you know what I mean?
That's good, Fred. Well done, Fred.
But equally, I went last minute, bought a ticket, and I paid for whatever because I did. But if you're a rugby league fan, do you know a year ago? Do you know 6 months ago there were deals on tickets? The tickets were cheaper. We were out there. They were selling offers. They were doing family offers. So if you're a rugby league fan who is whinging about ticket prices, why did you not get them 6 months ago?
Exactly. That last minute discounting is bad.
Yeah.
Bad for the sport.
Oh no, it's not because you've got your discount.
Everyone thought it would happen because it happens. In domestic competition, and I think it's good that they've stuck to their guns.
Well, there has to be a prestige.
£2.21 to take your child last night.
There has to be prestige about the international game.
£2.21.
Exactly.
You cannot pay the same as you do for a Super League game for an international game. You have to make that differentiation. Your competition has to be prestigious. But I think the other thing that has been missed about all of the ticket prices and the attendances, particularly at games, is this is the first time every game has been on television, on mainstream
all
television.
61, all live on the BBC.
So if that is available to you as a
That
consumer,
sounded like an advert.
It's proper on message.
I've been trained up now very well.
You can't do ads on the BBC, but you can do ads about the
About
BBC.
training
elsewhere.
wasn't from us,
Yeah.
but-
Yeah.
so in the past, if you wanted to go to a game, you had to go, otherwise you wouldn't see it. Now
Yeah.
you can say the attendances aren't very good, but I can sit at home
I mean,
and watch it.
one of the, let's not, go into people on Twitter, but someone said, if the stand's going to be empty, don't put it on TV. Hello, it's 2022. That's what sport is. It's what's on TV. That's what they sell. That's how the players get paid. That's how the stadium gets rented. That is all there is. If it's not on TV, it isn't on. It doesn't exist in 2022.
But then the person that's saying that is watching it from the TV, and if we didn't put it on TV, would then be whinging.
Yeah.
So like,
Why is it on the channel I have to pay for?
Yeah. However, do you know that Tonga and PNG is on BBC 3 tonight? FYI, everybody.
Are you on it?
Where is,
No.
where is BBC Three?
Somewhere on the.
Next to
on
BBC Two and
don't
below.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I don't know.
On
Where
the
it
As
is.
long as,
channel
as
flicker.
long as when you're looking for the red button, you don't go too far back into the 900, you'll be all right.
Yeah, I understand, what Phil is saying about sort of corporate speak and putting out an apology, and it is. I didn't think it was so bad they put out. I kind of, it jarred with me that everyone said exactly the same line. They all said exactly the same thing, and there wasn't that natural kind of. But I can understand if you've been involved in planning a World Cup for all this time, and something like that goes wrong, it really hits you. You get really upset, and you imagine everyone else is more upset
Yes.
than they are. So. There's a balance to be struck, I guess.
We're going so long, they didn't have a cockerel on the top of it when we started this World Cup process, and now it's back. Before I don't ask everyone who's going to win the World Cup, because that's a terrible question to end with. Any questions from the audience, of which there are people here? I mean, you can't see this.
Unlike myself at book launch.
24-man squads, do you think that's big enough?
24-man squad, not enough, too many?
Good question.
Injury, suspension, it's going to take its toll.
I think with the vagaries of potential suspensions, but it seems to me that international football has a little bit more leeway and a bit more allowance as to who gets hit round the head and who doesn't. And I'm all for that, because the least the referees blow their whistle, the better the games are, if you're not reflected upon that. So I think 24 men, women, I don't know how many's in the disabled, 12. I think it's enough. I think if you were talking about going overseas, I never thought it was 24 for the Great Britain teams that we used to take for 6 or 7 years. That was never enough. I'd have taken 403, 48, because of the travel vagaries, and that made it difficult. But with it, I think 24 is enough. Yeah.
Where do we go from after the World Cup? We've got France in 2025. What are we going to do for not just the
Great
main
question.
4 nations, but the emerging nations as well? It's all very well saying Greece are fantastic now. What are we going to like in
Great
2025?
question.
Where's the competition? Where's the international football coming?
Oh, we're going to play the combined nations again this year, aren't we?
Now we're playing France.
Oh, good.
Can I make a point before you
France.
answer that, Phil? Phil's in a good position, probably Steve's. I think we've got to get a grip of our international schedule. I think we've spent a long time not having one, and part of that is the strength of the NRL. Is club football over there is number 1, and international football is number 2. Sorry, Origin is number 1 in the NRL, and then international football. We've got to get back to a place where we can find a window where the Aussies will play, because I always want to see the Australia, the number 1 team in the world, and we can find meaningful tours and international fixtures that we can buy into, including all of the nations that are coming into this now, and make it meaningful. I think we took a step towards it with the Pacific Nations Cup down in Australia, which I think has illuminated, I think the difference in Australia and their view, it might not be the actual national team of Australia, but is that the heritage players, and Tonga particularly, and Fiji, and Papua New Guinea, and the amount of money that the NRL has invested in their feeder clubs for these things to grow, I think they're on the verge of having something, if not as special as Origin. Remember, Origin is what they live and die for, the number 1 TV show in Australia. I think we've got to bring the Australians to the party, and they make a meaningful contribution to international football, i.e. commit to some tours, commit to this, that and the other. And we have to plan, it's a brilliant question, we have to plan international football, because I think it's the next best telly time. I think broadcasters want to see it, I think fans want to see it, and I think we need to encourage the International Federation needs to have a whole lot more money than it's got.
You can see the difference that the media, different way the media treat international football. it's just emerging nations as well. There's
Yeah.
nothing as far as I can, very small competition. And I think the case is not enough money as usual. We need some sort of competition between World Cups for the 4 big nations or 5 big nations, wherever they're at, as well as the small.
We never used to have qualifiers for World Cups. You know, you just got invited. So this is the first Women's World Cup that had qualifiers. Qualifiers. So that's a massive, step forward. But I believe, up in Newcastle, the International Federation had their Congress late last week, and there's still a lot of disagreement about the international calendar. And there's 2 big camps, and we've been promised an international calendar for how long now? Phil, you know the background.
We've been promised a 10-year calendar for the last 10 years.
But that's the difficult, isn't it? The seasons don't quite run in line with each other, and like you
But
say,
they're
you've got
going to. And I think the 2 things to mention is IMG seem to see what we're talking about, and they have prioritised an international element, and they are bringing the parties to the table. The qualifier thing is really interesting because the advantage of having only 3 years between this and the next World Cup is that the qualifiers will kick in 2023. There will be the first African nations at the next World Cup, and their qualifiers are already set. I think the European Championship and a Euro B for the developing nations is also set. It's not set in the round in that everybody is agreeing it. It's done through the European Federation, but there is a willingness that this World Cup is bringing to the table that International Rugby League has to take precedence.
It's got to be an incentive
Yeah.
for players, young players in particular. as
Well,
well.
and again, it's not a criticism, but rather than announcing the fixtures for Magic Weekend at Newcastle in the middle of a World Cup, which I understand from a marketing point of view, what we should be doing is saying there's an Ashes tour on next year, and the first game is being played at St James's Park, and you can.
Except that decision hasn't been made. I mean,
Exactly, but
the thing is, like, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I mean, we were very happy 4 years ago when we had standalone Origin on a weekend, which meant the guys who weren't Origin players could play for their country in Australia. Well, some of them chose to play for their country instead of Origin, which and some of them wanted to play Origin and then play for the other countries. And then they found the ratings weren't as good. So the ratings weren't as good on a Sunday as they are on a Wednesday night. So now they've scrapped it. It's gone again next year. So Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, PNG, they cannot play mid-season now because they've scrapped it because to get better ratings for Origin. So we always look for things that kind of change and stay changed in rugby league. And it seems like 75% of things change and then change back. And it's that 25%, those things that stay changed. And I think all these matches on the BBC, I mean, Andy Wilson texted me last night. He said if you went to the 1995 Emerging Nations, which we all went to, it was watched by 200 people or whatever, and the Russians were selling their jerseys behind the grandstand after the matches, and now to see Greece and France on the BBC live. They're the things that stay changed. They're the things that have changed and will stay changed. We're not going to go back to behind the grandstand with the Russians flogging there. That has stay changed, and they're the things we have to look out for.
Yeah, and well, these are 2 different levels. Obviously, you're talking top echelon. If you're talking the bottom level, and I've got to go back to my own experience, which is way back in 1990, going to the Cook Islands, Tonga, and Samoa with Bala, and then Fiji in '92 to set up the next tour, and then those 3 nations and Fiji again. You've got to my mind, if you start sending out community international teams, which they can go and play on these islands, in these areas, and then help to develop international at the right level. Because, when they're playing top amateur players, they're still quite good players, and they're still too difficult for domestic competitions, but it gives them some yardstick to go against. South Africa did it in 1995, I was over there twice to get them in that World Cup, and again in 2000. And that's where we don't utilise it. The amateur players are expected to pay for themselves. If the international competition put money aside to send these groups of top line amateur players, community players, then you'll get something to set them on the road to actually in 10, 15 years, it might be, or in 2 or 3 years, depending on how quickly they can develop, to actually play other nations and then part of the qualifier. But it's that long-term goal in at a short-term gain and the combination. And like you said, they're all arguing at the top table, aren't they? Because they all want the money, either for the top stars or to be in amongst the top stars right at the start. And this reflective of what we have from League One into Super League. Everybody wants to be the top table. Nobody wants to earn the places there.
Any more questions?
But
Isn't it
I
about
might
time
have
we
to
had
go
one set of
move
rules
the car and come back.
for rugby league?
Sorry, say that again, sorry.
Isn't it about time we had one set of rules for rugby league instead of one in this country, one in Australia, and one for international?
And we'll all be fans of the Captain's Challenge.
The NRL
Aston
just
Gold.
see themselves as Formula One, so they don't care what anyone else does. If they want to change the rules from one season to the next and give 2 points for a drop goal from their own side of halfway, they'll just do it. They don't feel they owe anyone an explanation for what they do. And in fact, it comes right from the top. It comes from Peter V'landys. People writing letters to the newspaper. He reads it and goes, "Oh, 2-point field goal, 6 again. That's a good idea. Let's do it next weekend." And it's down to personalities. You know?
But it's down to money, isn't it? If the International Rugby League Federation had pots and pots of money, maybe like the Rugby Union do have, then they could dictate to domestic competitions and say, look, you're not getting any of this pot of money unless we have one set of rules.
If you had an
Well, we're not
internationalist,
strong enough for that.
let's say Peter V'landys was replaced by Andrew Hill or someone, you know, then his view might be different to Peter V'landys. He might go, well, that's a good idea. Let's get it approved by the International Rules Committee for next year. But you know, personalities have an impact as well.
Just hoping that the Australian women walk off after 35 minutes.
30.
30.
It's 30 each way up there.
Is it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
what are you
which is-
playing, Danica? 40?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, we're proper over here, right?
Yeah, we play full rules. We play exactly the same as men, same size ball, same size pitch, everything. I know it's crazy to think.
Oh, yeah, because they
we
play
do.
with a smaller ball in Australia as well, don't they?
Yeah. Size 4. And they play shorter time, so I mean, you can only cross your fingers and hope and pray that makes a big effect, but I don't think it will.
I think the one
The
Warrington
weather
supporter
is
has
our
got a
biggest.
question.
A Warrington supporter.
He's there. And I just thought I'd point him out.
I want to be like Fiona Bruce, gentleman in the brown shirt.
It was a less serious question, which is what do you make of the Australian squad numbering system?
I mean, I couldn't care less, but it's hilarious how much it's wound people up. It's brilliant.
I argued on Twitter that it made no difference and it was an interesting thing, and then watching the game it confused the hell out of me. So.
I mean, I've got no idea who anyone is anyway, so it doesn't make any difference to me. Josh Adokaka,
Apparently the decision was made
433.
two years ago, so it's nothing new, and obviously squad numbers upset people in Australia. You know, they like you to change the numbers every week, but then if it's in the program on a Wednesday, you got to wear whatever numbers you've got on a Wednesday. And so I guess someone just said, whether it was Michael Hagan, said, well, if they're going to make us do this other thing we don't like, we're going to make it twice as confusing for them. I don't know. You know?
I think it's good for anybody that doesn't know rugby league or is new to it or is new to some of the teams, because Lily you can look at the sheet, can't you? You can find out who's who and who's what. But I think from a play point of view, I think it's more disappointing from a play point of view. So if you've grafted, and let's say I'm a prop and I get a starting shirt, I'm number 8, and I play in 8, but my squad number's 14. I've earned a starting shirt and I want that 8, but I've still got to play with 14. I think, regardless of what
back
we
to how
think.
you felt at your last season?
No, because if you're 15, you're 15, aren't you? Like, that's what I mean. So it's not as who doesn't want to have a 1 to 13 shirt? And you can see that the teams that have done it properly, who the 1 to 13, who the favourable players are, because they've got the 1 to 13. Australia, I quite like the fact that they've just thrown a bomb in there and gone, we're going to do what we want. Latrell Mitchell's got number 8. Now I want Latrell Mitchell's shirt. Not a big fan of South Sydney. Not a particularly big fan of his, but I want his shirt now because he's got my number. So it's worked in terms of a viewer or a fan's perspective.
When we first played with this in 1996, the idea would be like Michael Jordan, and you'd have a number for your whole career, and you'd be able to market yourself as that number.
And you'd change clubs in that number, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and that it never quite happened. You know, it was like we had team selection night once a year instead of once a week. You know, so.
But if we got international rugby league back to the halcyon days when I've recognised so many brilliant number 8s for Australia, I can reel them off. I'm not a big fan of the squad numbers and the way that they've tried to number up. I sat there and I think, well, it's just typically Australian. And that's what I thought. I said,
But they would sit there and go, typical
with.
Pommies making us wear squad numbers. We don't do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
for me, it should be 1 to 17.
And this
on
is
the
why
day.
the two rules don't match up together.
But I can see why they did introduce squad numbers from the Rugby League World Cup point of view, because they're trying to appeal to an unfamiliar audience, and you have that number for the entire tournament with the name on the back. So yeah, I get your point. It's being disrespectful, but if over the course of the next 5 weeks Latrell Mitchell becomes a household name and he's number 8, and someone in St Ives recognises that number 8, I want to see him play again because he was good last time.
I think it reflects a sort of change in society and popular culture where with sport we used to want to know about rules and people's roles and what they do, and now it's all about personality. So the idea that a position you play is more important than your name is ridiculous in social media age. Your name is more important than what you do. You know, you can be famous for doing nothing, and I think it kind of reflects that. You know, it's more about you and you being a star than what you do on the field. That's boring.
You're not trading about some kind of Prim 8 logo, like Roger Federer.
No, but equally, right? If you're number 24 in that squad, do you feel like you've just scraped in?
So why can't we just pick 1 to 17 on the day, and then if the
exactly.
number 6 is Brett Kenny or Wally Lewis, you can say I've got Brett Kenny or Wally Lewis's shirt.
That's what I agree.
Because he's a number 6, or I've got Ray Price's at number 13, or Wayne Pearce at number 12.
Well,
This is the
get
shirt
the
that
other
I've been saying.
The irony of jumpers and marketing and merchandising is you can't buy the jumpers. So you can say, oh, Latrell Mitchell's in 8. That's going to be a real collector's item.
Can't get one.
You can't get one.
Who'd have thought that the most controversial topic would be the bloody Australian squad numbers? But it's always.
I quite like when somebody throws a spanner in the works, so I quite like it. So
Mate, we'll put our numbers on what we want to put them on, and you'll like it.
if anyone can get me a Latrell Mitchell shirt though.
You must have. You're working for the BBC.
What's he number 1 or number 3, Latrell Mitchell?
I've just told you the only reason I want his shirt is because it says number 8 on it.
What about you?
Because you played that position.
Yeah.
But you're unique in that respect.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you, regardless of what, well done Australia, because I now want the Latrell Mitchell shirt. I cannot stand South Sydney, I'm a Roosters fan.
You must be happy that one of the top Sydney Roosters fans is wearing 7 for England then, when our squad number's been announced.
That's a whole different ball game.
Courtney Winfield Hill.
And Aussie's wearing number 7 for England.
So a lot of the manufacturers, in case people are interested, a lot of the manufacturers have only made enough jerseys for the team. They haven't even just bothered to put them retail. We go through them. We obviously know England are available everywhere. Ireland, you can get from O'Neill's. VX3 of doing Wales and Scotland, you can buy them. PNG, none for retail at all. Australia, as far as I know, none for retail at all.
Wow.
BLK are selling New Zealand stuff. Cook Islands, their manufacturer is saying you have to buy it from us. You can't buy it from anyone else.
Well, in fairness, the Cook Islands are fairly small, so I'll give them the benefit of the
Well,
doubt.
I think the manufacturer's in Adelaide, so the size of the Cook Islands.
What about Fiji? Who were there?
Fiji is not returning emails. I haven't seen.
Because I would buy a Fiji shirt.
Yeah. They're not, and I think it's because the biggest issue is the sponsorships are done at the last minute. So everyone goes, don't make them. We're going to get a sponsor. And then by the time they make them, there's no time to get them over here. There's no time to make them any numbers. And so, so it is really. Everyone says, oh, the problem with the World Cup is they never get the jerseys made in time to sell at the games, and that's one problem we're not making progress on, sadly.
I think we've done. Unless there's anyone else who's got any final questions.
Or would like a book.
People got to go and get the cars.
I would like a book from Steve.
Yeah. If you want to buy Steve's book, he's got his book. What's it called, Steve? What's it about?
2 Tribes. It's the 3rd edition.
Has it got all the spelling mistakes out now?
It's got fewer typos than any previous edition.
I've got a first edition collectors now. I'm well chuffed. Oh,
Is that your sales pitch? Because I'm saying it's not very good. Come on, give me a real one.
No, it's been it's been around for a little while, but it's the story of 1997, the only year that there were 2 competitions in Australia, and the reason we have Super League, the reason the clubs that are around now are around, and the reason the clubs that aren't around now are not around. 100 interviews, including people obviously who aren't. I say obviously because it has been a year, and we're all not getting younger, but Bob Fulton, Peter Mulholland, Maurice Lindsay, all interviewed in here, and yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. Anyway, so
good book.
Good book.
Buy it.
Good book.
Good read.
It's got no squad number in her. No problem.
It is. It's about the origins of squad numbers in 1997. It's all about squad numbers.
No confusion.
And while we're doing the adverts, tune in BBC Radio Manchester 95.1 FM, 5 till 6, Rugby League Extra. Myself and Jack Dean, along with Stacey Copeland. So you can have that one as well.
Well, I was just about to ask you. It's always a pleasure. I just want to ask you, where's your sidekick?
He's in Portugal at the moment. Funny enough.
It's all right for some, innit?
Okay,
well, it is.
You're on the short straw. Danica and Brian, you're both on the telly. Have you got anything else you want to promote?
On the telly?
No, I just think just tune in. I think regardless.
I've not said much about the women's or the wheelchair World Cups or the PDRL, but
we've got time for that.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
Martin Coyne's watching.
I think it's live on the BBC, and it's not about selling the BBC. It's about selling the sport, and the more coverage that the sport gets, the better, isn't it? So. BBC 3 tonight for which I think is going to be so far the game of the tournament for me. Tonga, PNG, and we talk about how small the family of rugby league is. You know, you got the likes of Conrad Hurrell and Tui going up against Rhys Martin just as a bare bones, despite the rest of the fact that it's going to be, I think it's going to be a colossal battle, and I'm really excited to watch it.
I mean, we've got to say thanks to Eccles Library for inviting us here today, because that means we can go off to St Helens, because it doesn't mean we have to go back. Phil, the magazine's out.
It is.
I'll hold it up in
With
front of the camera.
fill-in charts of each of the competitions, and who doesn't want a fill-in chart? Let's be honest. So put all the results down, and you can plot where each nation's going to be later in the competition.
Somewhere blackboard, it's great.
The best
might take
TV
it
columnist since Clive James in there as well. What's it? Fill-in. Well, it's just your column, Danny. So that's it. Thank you very much for coming. Much appreciated, because seriously, people don't turn up to these things, but we don't tell them that. So thank you very much for coming. Thanks for spending your time. Take a biscuit, patronise Steve, and enjoy the rest of the World
Also
Cup.
buy a book.
Buy a book.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.